Next, on the referendum chessboard, we have the sermon and a call to repentance. Also, praying for the nation or playing with the nation. We shall be looking at the hits and the misses of the National Prayer Breakfast 18 editions later. Plus, facing Mount Kenya, a case of the speaker and the spokesman. I will tell you why so many people are speaking about this. On the kicker tonight, are we on a wing and a prayer? That's what Kai will be asking. Shuri will be punching into the amazing, astounding tales from Wajir County, where we have one county and we have two governors. The angle is on time, but what about the BBI? Yvonne and Jamila are off tonight, but we'll have some guest gangsters, I should say, tonight. Peter Wayaki, you saw him at the National Prayer Breakfast. He'll be joining us, as well as Ambassador Jack Tumwa, formerly of ECK. Let's start the show.
The former Prime Minister also said something that was profound. In fact, in a very uncharacteristic manner, he gave us a verse, and he told us about Isaiah 1:18 that says, "Come, let us reason together." Maybe again, God is speaking to us and saying, "Come, let us reason together."
All right, so sounds there from the National Prayer Breakfast. And Peter, I'll start with you. A little bit of a self-introduction, how you got into the National Prayer Breakfast, giving the keynote there. Most of the time it is reserved for people from other lands, as it were.
So how did I get in?
Yes.
I was invited to give the keynote address and prayed about it. I was available and I accepted.
You said quite some things about integrity.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, and what a subject to speak about. I mean, in this country, we always hear all kinds of things going on almost on a single day. Yes. What about integrity? Of all the things that you could have spoken about.
Actually, my topic was not on integrity. My topic was a hopeful future for the people of Kenya. And in talking about a hopeful future, there's an implication that where we are is not great. So the angle we took was to look at the past. Where are we coming from? What has happened in the past? What hopes have we had and which may have been dashed before? And what happened? What went wrong? And therefore, learning from that, how can we look forward? Is there actually hope for Africa and for Kenya specifically? And the answer was yes, there is a hope. There is hope for Africa. There is hope for Kenya. We are greatly endowed, but there are a few things we need to look at that will help us to realize that hope so that we can have a hopeful future. And for me, the number one issue is integrity.
And actually, we can listen to what you said about integrity and telling the truth.
Whoever we are, however low or high, whatever our situation and station in life, we need to commit to integrity. What is integrity? Integrity is doing what you said you will do, when you said you'll do it, and how you said you'll do it. It is keeping your word, your promise, even when it hurts you to do so. It is choosing, when faced with choices, the hard right rather than the easy wrong. It is only making promises that you have both the intention and the capacity to keep. But it is also giving and keeping promises that you must by virtue of the role that you play.
Linus, you know, they say that the book usually reads better when you know the author. Shall I say that soundbite sounds better because you're sitting right next to them?
I'm sitting right next to the author, who in his very solid presentation today also quoted a book, and Peter, I want to refer you to, you talk of hope, and you quoted Professor George Kinoti, and this book, Hope for Africa and What the Christian Can Do. You quoted, and I want to just pick that up, the story of Africa reads like a chronicle of perpetual doom. The scenario unfolds in slavery and moves to colonial oppression, followed by short-lived post-independence bliss. This is soon overshadowed by a state of gross mismanagement, war, political turmoil, and economic regression. Is there any hope? But as you're asking this question today, which bit of all these things that Professor Kinoti speaks of, state of gross mismanagement, war, political turmoil, economic regression, which bit are we in as Kenyans?
I think first of all is to remember, as I said in the speech, that book was written in 1994. And it's about Africa, not just about Kenya. Although Professor George Kinoti is actually a zoologist in Kenya, teaches at the university, or I think still does, has taught for a very long time. So there were certain things happening at that time in Africa, in Kenya. So take that with that context. However, we have seen a lot of economic mismanagement over the years. You can talk from independence, even until now. You can talk of economic regression and stagnation in a lot of areas. And that is basically what I was talking about. But all those things tend to happen at the same time. We haven't had wars, we've had some skirmishes here and there. We haven't had those in Kenya. But again, 1994 was when Rwanda was happening, if you recall.
And very solid things that were being said today, especially through your speech. And I was just wondering, how much would a national prayer breakfast change that the EACC cannot do in terms of corruption, that the political leadership cannot do in terms of integrity, that society itself cannot do in terms of the integrity, which you spread around, that it's not just about leaders, it's also about the population?
I think that's a very good question, Linus. Prayer is not a substitute for action. In fact, prayer is to enable action. Prayer is a recognition that we are not by ourselves adequate. We need divine assistance. We need divine help. And that divine help is available and has been promised. And so we go to God to pray, to say, you know what, you've given me this assignment. I want to do it. Help me do it. And that's why the fifth point of my speech today, of the 5 things that we should do, is really put our hope in God. Because without God, we cannot do the other 4. But God wants to enable us to do the other 4. Now, do you go to pray because EACC has failed, because people have failed? Partly. But also is to say you pray and then you go and take action. God is not going to come and exercise integrity on our behalf. He calls us to be people of integrity. But as I said again, sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes it's difficult to keep a promise or not to give a promise, especially in our context, because people think they get elected into office. People think they are sent into even appointed offices by making promises. And sometimes it is difficult to keep those. And that's why I said, do not make a promise that you don't have the intention of the capacity to keep, because that's lack of integrity.
Let me bring Ambassador here. I know you have followed this prayer breakfast for many years as someone who has been in this country and in public life for a while. Has anything changed in your view? I mean, what is the place of the national breakfast and vis-a-vis what Linus is saying, that there are things we can just go ahead and do?
Thank you for that. My brother here is my son, talking about hope. And I think it's very important that we give this country hope through prayer, if we can. I've attended only one prayer meeting when I was in Zambia. And what used to happen is that you have a prayer meeting and the ministers are assigned duties. What do they take off bits and pieces of what has been said during that prayer meeting? Then they get out to start implementing those. I have not seen it happen in this country. In fact, to many of us, the prayer meeting, important as it is now a formality where the big boys go to sit, say prayers, and unfortunately nothing serious is taken out of that. So to a large extent, although Wakili kama Wayaki came out with a very serious message as he did, if we ask ourselves what is going to be a follow-up of that, perhaps we'll find nothing.
Wow, and why is that?
It is, I don't know whether it is our political culture that we have started taking so many things for granted. There is not very much happening in this country that go to things like integrity. Let's look at our 2010 Constitution. I think it said so many things. There are so many things contained in that. Integrity is part of what is contained in that Constitution. Now you ask yourself, what has happened from that time when we had that Constitution? Integrity, responsibility, accountability, all these things are there. But really, you see nothing happening towards achieving the ends of what is contained. So we need serious action. We will not give up praying. We will go praying. But prayer needs to be accompanied by perhaps some form of enforcement so that it can achieve what we are looking for.
Joe, I listened to Peter during the prayer breakfast, and immediately I tried to Google and, the importance of prayer. And I came across an article, and I want to quote it here. Today, after so much prayer and meditation, I came away with one simple yet powerful message. Do not ask God to guide your footsteps if you're not willing to move your feet. Where you spoke was a very, very interesting place, and the people who are in attendance are also a very interesting place. Parliament has constitutional roles and functions. One among them is to make laws. Number two is to make sure that the resources that are collected from taxpayers and elsewhere are utilized effectively, oversight. And at the same time, because all of us cannot fit in Parliament to represent us. But every so often, in relation to the discussion about integrity and everything else, and good leadership generally, I would think that Parliament ought to be the epitome of good leadership and everything else. And more importantly, the executive was represented there, and so was the judiciary. I watched the president, the deputy, the speakers of the two chambers of Parliament, the Chief Justice were all in attendance. And I wish whatever you said in your presentation would be sufficient and carried through by all of them. The country would have been a great place to be from the moment you ended your speech. Unfortunately, I would probably think that as soon as you finished your speech, we restored back to factory settings. The things that you spoke about,
let me talk about
good as they were,
yes.
Unfortunately, as soon as we left that prayer breakfast, virtually and physically, restored back to factory settings. Not that it is a hopeless situation, it's a hopeful situation, progressively though, in my opinion.
I think first of all, you should always pray.
Absolutely.
If in doubt as to whether you should pray, pray. If you don't want to move your feet, pray that you start moving your feet and get ready to move your feet. Prayer does not change God. It changes us to want to do what He wants us to do. So that's number one. Number two, and it's very, very important, and I'll give in line as a copy of the speech that I made, to understand this was not a message just to the leaders of this country. And first of all, it's also not to the leaders, even where it was to leaders, political leaders. It was to leaders of churches, leaders of football clubs, leaders of business, and then it was to all Kenyans. And when we say nothing happens after prayer, first of all, when people pray, things happen. That definitely, and you don't necessarily see it. But if you're asking what is a response, what do people do? That message was for everybody. It's only point number 4, where I said leaders should be dealers in hope, where that was for leaders. Give us hope, deal in hope, look after us. The other 4 were entirely to every single person. I kept saying, however high, however low, whoever you are. some other people will say, whoever, even if who are you? You know that sort of thing? Even if who are you? Even if who are you? You are supposed to come out of there, Francis, saying, this is what has been said. Am I a person of integrity? What does that mean for me, for my family, for my workplace, for my church, for my country? When I say patriotism, it's about every one of us. It just happens, this is the one occasion we pray with our leaders. And it's excellent. I was very, very happy that both the president and the deputy president were there. But really the message, apart from point number 4, was for everybody. So if you're in factory setting, it is you, Francis, it's me, Peter, it's Jack here, it's all of us. It is the people who work at Citizen, all of us, because this country is not going to be changed. And the president caught that point very clearly, by a few, but by all of us. Yeah. But you also don't wait for others to do anything. You do it. Listen to the one point, for example. You must keep your promise even when it hurts you to do so. You've made a promise. Everybody makes a promise. I even made a promise to Linus to come here. I had to keep it, however inconvenient. That is what we are talking about, and that's a change we are looking for. It just happens that politicians make a lot of promises, and I say that, during elections, which are false, a lot of them, and which are then not followed, because they're not made with much thought. But they also know people vote when they get a little money, lack of integrity, and they vote when they are made promises, even when they know this guy made promises 5 years ago, did nothing, but somehow, because it's been said again, I'm about to believe it and to buy it.
Well, one of the areas in which the whole question of integrity comes in a lot in this country, and we're talking about this because we're in that season where people are beginning to talk about elections, voting, and all of those things. and so we have a problem where politicians, you see the promises you're talking about, and then when they get in, they forget about them, or people have to be given 50 bob, 100 bob, and that sort of thing to vote for a particular person. And Jack, when we get to the ballot, there's always this thing that Kenyans believe there's something that happened in that election. There's always just that suspicion that
it has been stolen.
It has been stolen. Actually, that is what we say.
Yeah.
Is it about us as a people, or is there something fundamentally wrong with how we do things? What is that? And I think the two of you will need to weigh in.
Okay.
I don't know who will go first.
Is it something to do with the leadership? You know, we have been brought up to trust a lot what comes
and please
from
speak
our
as someone who has handled elections in this country before.
You see, if you went in a place and addressed people and told them A, B, C, D, it may be very valid, just like Wakili's message today. People will hardly listen. A politician comes there and tells them a lot of things that may not be true, and that is the position they will take. So I believe we have to look at our leadership. If leaders can get a message, like the Wakili gave this morning, and go and try to multiply it, people will get it a lot faster. People actually, as he said, we have lost hope in this country. Lost hope because we see our leaders doing things that they are not supposed to do. They say Kenya has become a talking nation. We talk a lot, we say a lot of good things, but when it comes to action, we do completely the opposite. And it becomes very difficult for a person down there, when he sees his leader doing something contrary to what he's saying, he takes it as the rule. And that is where we are as a country. So I believe if we could get our leaders to act, to walk their talk, or how do they say it? I think we are going to move to a stage where everybody will benefit. But talking one thing and doing a completely different thing makes it completely difficult.
But is that what will make us believe in the election results, for example, that we have?
We cannot believe in the election result because for a long time, elections have been carried out. Those who lose come out and say they have lost. Even if they have not, those who win use means which are not acceptable, which are not in the rules, regulations to win elections. So there are two sides. The winning side, more often than not, uses irregular means to win. The losing side picks at that and comes up to say, we lost, we won, But because you used government resources, you used the askaris like it was in Kiambu the other day, it becomes again a problem of our practices. And yet these things, we can change them if we mean to change them for the benefit of everybody.
And Wakili, as you come in, I want to refer you back to the speech, because I was waiting to hear one or two places we can celebrate anything about us. And you gave us a little glimpse, but then left immediately. And I want to quote, while Kenyans are said to be some of the most resilient and happy people in the world, nobody has yet accused us of being ethical and honest, to our collective shame. And as you comment on that, your next line also applies. Tribalism, disunity, and feelings of exclusion continue to thrive in spite of the promises and hopes of one united Kenya. Was this in a way a charge sheet? You're reading a charge sheet to the congregation that was gathered before you today?
Once again, it's not the congregation gathered before me today, it's everybody, every Kenyan. But let me start by saying it's true, everything rises and falls on leadership. So leadership is important. But let me also say there's no class of people called leaders, and that might surprise a lot of people, because everybody is a leader. Everybody leads somebody. And the least of us leads ourselves, such that I am a leader to some extent, whether my family, my church group, my Bible study group, my home, some of the companies I'm a director of, I'm a leader. So I think we have this perception that because we've elected people to office, then they become leaders. And therefore, we lump everything on them. But again, they say in some languages, ugali comes from the unga. Okay? You will never get a crop of leaders holding office, now the ones we elect, if the wananchi, all of us, are not of integrity. Who is going to elect people of integrity if the voters are not of integrity? How will they get there? I'll go run in Limuru constituency, for example, if I may. And I should say one or two people on social media have offered me their votes, should I choose. But that's also the problem about rigging, where one or two people tells you are the best, and you run, and suddenly there are no votes. Because one guy also told somebody else, and not even your wife believed it, and the votes are just not enough, and so you are rigged. So that's one. And maybe there are cases of rigging, maybe. But that said, there is no way an unethical society is going to put ethical people in office. I think we just have to accept that, which is why for me, it is starting where we are. We have many voters in this room. We have to be ethical ourselves in order to vote one of us. Suppose we had to choose one of us to be our leader. Is our leader going to be ethical if none of us is? If majority of us are not, what are the chances we're going to choose an ethical leader from among us, unless they're the treasurer? You know, people always say the treasurer of the group, that guy needs to be honest. Because they know they need somebody good, but the chair can be a mess, for example, because he didn't handle money. Misplaced perception of leadership. That if you have the pass, you should be honest. If you're the chair who has a trusteeship of the entire group, you don't have to be. So my message again, number one, everybody starting now in the morning, I hope everybody has been doing it for the last 12 hours, needs to embrace integrity.
Okay, we are about
and there are many other questions which I can't answer all of them at the same time.
Yeah, we are about to finish this segment, but Ambassador, I wanted to ask you this very specifically, and this relates to where we are, because we are in a situation where we are talking about a referendum, we are talking about an election in 14 months, and here we are, the IEBC, the equivalent of which you worked for many years ago, has been stopped basically from, preparing, because the very referendum is a point of dispute in the legal tussle that's going on there. If you are the IEBC right now, what are you doing? I mean, you have an election in 14 months, and somewhere in between there might be a referendum. What ought to be going on now at the IEBC?
You may have forgotten that the court has also stopped me from acting on certain things. Yes. It is difficult, actually. I think the agents which are supposed to support IEBC are making it very difficult for it to function. First, let's take the position of filling the vacant posts, which have remained vacant for a very, very long time. If you remember Kriegler report, which was our report, Kriegler took it, put it down and called it his report. The recommendation was that the commissioners be in position at least 2 years before the election. IEBC now should be in a process, in fact, it should be running to the final stages of organizing the 2002 elections. There are things like procurement, there are things like training, there are things like identifying people to be in proposition. It has been operating with the 3 people for quite some time now, and yet we expect it to go and undertake a successful, credible elections. Some people are saying that the 3 who are there should be pushed out as soon as these 4 come in. That would be actually suicide. It is preparing to fail. It is preparing IEBC to fail. Today I've had a recommendation which I wish to go with from the Catholic bishops, who are saying perhaps we should seriously think about the 2002 election
2022.
2002?
22.
I beg your pardon. Yeah. But forget about these things of referendum.
Actually, we can
Actually,
listen
Bishop Kivuva
yes.
has that soundbite.
We propose that to ensure a democratic, constitutional, and inclusive process that is based on law and dialogue, and as far-reaching constitutional amendments should only be addressed after 2022 general elections. In the meantime, Kenyans should pursue, through the parliament, some essential reforms to ensure a peaceful, progressive, and prosperous country in the lead up to the after 2022 general election. We demand that the August 2022 general elections proceed as provided for in the Constitution, and not should be thought of as postponing it to a later date or should be entertained whatsoever.
All right.
Fully agree with that observation. One, because if we go in for another election this time, there is no time even for preparing ourselves sufficiently to have a referendum. We are going to rush into it. The result may be contested, and by doing that, we are eating into the time of IEBC preparing for a more important thing, and that is the election of 2002. So I agree with him that the things that are supposed to be done, really, most of them are administrative. Most of them can be done through the parliament as it is now. If the parliament took its role seriously to look at interpreting and giving teeth to the 2010 constitution, we will not be where we are. And if we have to reform, if we have to look at our constitution afresh, I suggest that we go the 2010 method, where we will give ourselves sufficient time and have a constitution, and by looking at the constitution, we'll be looking out of the box. I think now we are just operating within the box. Things like saying parliament will approve so and so, it will sit to approve this and that. And you know, I think you will agree with me that if there is any group which has let this country down, it's the parliament. I want to say it here like that, because they get there and they look at their own interests, they get there, and I don't know whether most of them understand what is contained in the Constitution anyway. And those are some of our problems. So we have to start and saying, this is a democratic country. In democracy, I think there's an element which says the majority rule. In Kenya, I want to observe that we are being administered by a minority government. Why do I say so? If we say the president should be elected by 50 +1, why can't we get out of the box and say even members of parliament should be elected by 50-1 so that we get parliamentarians who have been elected by the majority. I think if you were to make an assessment in that parliament today, you'll hardly get more than 20% people who got 50+1 voters. And yet here they are telling everybody they represent the people. They represent the minority.
The majority will have their way, and the minority will have their say.
Come again.
So says the balance in democracy. But even as we speak about the whole process of amending the constitution vis-a-vis the general election next year, the Court of Appeal is preparing to hear the appeals, 3 of them that have been filed. And time is of essence, but more practically, you'll hear proposals about creation of new constituencies and how they will be distributed. Another point of discussion. But at the same time, Peter, there are also lawyers who tell us the law is very clear, that it is also possible to walk and chew gum. I mean, we can prepare for an election and at the same time deal with the contentious issues that are in the Constitution. And actually, is the Constitution the problem, or us as the people, an implementation of the Constitution the problem?
But because Peter is a lawyer, I think it would be good to just walk through just the process.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people may not understand the whole thing of appealing and all. There are many terminologies that we've been hearing about, because many people think you can actually just walk there and tomorrow there's a ruling or whatever. What are the practicalities?
I'll just try and explain that very, very quickly, because I told Linus I do not want to come there purport to be a constitutional lawyer, because I've read the Constitution, because every lawyer in Kenya has read the Constitution, or should have, and not every lawyer is a constitutional lawyer. However, in terms of the process, that's not constitutional. And I'm not saying I'm not a constitutional lawyer, I'm just not saying that I am. Sort that out. Now, what is the process? The court has decided, and some people are unhappy. As usual, the winners are happy, the losers are not happy. People will feel offended. And there are people who feel offended by some, and not all. And so you have a right to prefer an appeal to the Court of Appeal. In all likelihood, there'll be a hearing by 5 judges, because there were 5, right? There were already 5. There's probably going to be a hearing by 7. And we already have a problem about the number of judges in the Court of Appeal. But as you wait for the appeal to be heard, you can apply for what is called a stay of execution. And I believe that the people who are appealing, the appellants, have already applied for that. What are you telling the court to do? You're telling the court, you've made this decision, you've said we cannot carry on doing this. For example, IEBC cannot continue verifying any signatures if they're verifying any. But we are saying, please, Court of Appeal, say that in the interim, before you hear the full appeal and make a decision, that holding of the High Court will not apply. So life can continue as before. And I believe that's an application made by the appellant. Can you stay execution of that judgment, 5-bench judgment, so that life goes on as before, as we wait to hear from you, the Court of Appeal, whether in fact they were right or wrong. And let me tell you, a surprising thing is that judges are allowed to be wrong. That's why there's a Court of Appeal. And the Court of Appeal recognizes, as a High Court judge, I'm not perfect. I could get it wrong. That doesn't mean I'm bad or I don't know the law. I could misunderstand the law. I could misinterpret it. And that's why sometimes we even have a dissenting bench, where maybe 2 people disagree with the other 3, or 1 disagrees with 4, and so on and so on. So the Court of Appeal is there to say, were they right? And were they right in everything that they said? And were they right specifically in the matters which are appealed against? And the court will tell us in due course. The only thing is that it does take time. You probably have seen the amount of paperwork we file as lawyers, and judges have to go through that. If you're dealing with a bench of 7, for example, the president of the Court of Appeal, Justice Musinga, has to determine, out of I think the 12 who are there, which 7 or which 5 do we put to hear this case. And remember, when they're deciding that case, then they keep away from all other appeal cases in the country. But I think this is urgent enough, and I believe that the court will make a decision soon enough, so that we know which way we are going. Are they staying? Are they not staying? And sometimes judges say, no, we're not going to give you a stay of execution, maybe because of this reason or that reason, and we don't comment on the merits of the particular cases. But instead, we'll hear you on a priority basis, so that we dispose of the entire appeal on a priority basis. And I suspect that could happen. If they do that, then we could have a judgment in a matter of weeks or a few months. If they go the other longer route, we could have it in a matter of a few more months. Yeah. Now, is the Constitution the problem? Is the law as clear as we lawyers say it is? The law is very clear. We just can't agree what it says in its clarity. Because it's clear to me, it's clear to you, which is why we have people on different sides of a case. I argue my case, you argue your case. You don't judge my case, I don't judge your case. The judge judges the case. And the judges, the only final determination is the Supreme Court, which is why appeal system, because I disagree. Now, the Constitution has a lot of nice things that could be done, but remember that the cases we have are some of them saying there are some things that need to be changed, which means somebody thinks it's not as good as it could be. Is it fully implemented? We haven't implemented every single thing. We're still learning. We're still learning some things. For example, today it was said the president had wrongly appointed some parastatal directors and heads and so on, and that was annulled. Although, again, part of what our courts must do, and I'm sure the new Chief Justice will attend to this, is when you say people were appointed 3 years ago were appointed wrongly for a period of 3 years, what are you supposed to do when you do it 3 years later? Which is also a case of backlog of cases, and judges determining this is urgent, needs to be decided quickly, because if you don't decide it quickly, then it defeats the purpose of coming to court. I think some of the people whose appointment was annulled today may have finished their terms.
They've already served their term, actually.
Or they've served so much that to remove them for 2 months, it doesn't matter.
They repay.
All right, so we need to go for a break. So, gentlemen, thank you very, very much for having been guest gangsters. We hope you did not feel attacked by the gang. But thank you so much. We really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
So coming up after the break, we'll be facing Mount Kenya, the speaker, the spokesman, and the people speaking about it.